Hey guys, and welcome back. So today we're going to be making some biltong. Let's get into the kitchen and let's get started making this delicious South African snack. Before we get started cutting up the meat, we're going to need to make the spices we're going to be using. So I'm going to make 2 batches today because not everyone likes it spicy. I'm going to be using my lovely dried peri peri peppers. I'm not going to need too many of these. So for this batch, we're just going to put about 5 of them. And with both batches, when you're making biltong, you always use a lot of coriander. So I buy big bags of the dried coriander seeds. So just as much as you like, it's not really a problem. Let's grind up the coriander seeds. First we'll do the ones without the peppers. So one thing I didn't mention was the peppercorns. When I grind up the coriander, I add in about a tablespoon of peppercorns. You can add a little bit less if you want, but I would add some in there. It really adds to the flavor. You can use ground pepper if you want, but I like using the whole peppercorns. And when you're grinding it up, as long as your blender or whatever you're using to grind up the coriander is strong enough, it'll break up the peppercorns as well. And then of course salt. So salt is an important part of the biltong making process. It helps preserve the meat, but you don't want to add too much as well as you don't want to add too little. You want to add about half a cup of coarse salt to 3 cups of the coriander and pepper mix. So basically that's about 1/6 the amount of your overall ingredients needs to be salt. And then you want to add some sweetness. So typically you'd add the same amount of sugar as you did with the salt. So in this case we've used half a cup of salt. We're going to use also half a cup of sugar. You can use brown sugar, you can use white sugar, it doesn't really matter. I actually use sweetener, I use erythritol. So it really is up to you, but it just finishes off the flavor profile quite nicely. So remember, these are the core ingredients when you make biltong. Your coriander, salt and peppercorns. So make sure that you have those there, but then once you've done this a couple times, experiment. So use things like maybe garlic powder or onion powder, or you can add in many other different ingredients. Just try not to add fresh ingredients because during the drying process they could potentially go off, so you don't want to have that added. Now we get to the meat. So here I'm using beef. You can use any other types of meats as well. I wouldn't use pork or lamb, but red meats like beef is good. If you can get hold of deer or buck, that's really good. In South Africa, you'd often be able to get kudu biltong, which is really tasty. You can also get ostrich biltong, which is really good. So there's quite a few varieties of meat that you can use. Today we're using beef. I wait till I can get hold of beef at around about £5 a kilogram. Morrison's have a special on at the moment for about £4.50 for a kilogram. So I bought up quite a bit of that. So what you see me doing here is I'm looking for the striations on the meat. I'm looking for the lines. And what you want to do is you want to cut with the lines, with the grain of the meat, so that when you eat it, it makes it a lot easier to eat. Just trust me on this one. And the thickness, you can do it around about 1 inch thickness. If you make it a little bit thicker, then that means that your biltong will be a bit softer or a bit more red in the middle. If you want it drier, like the way I like it, then I make it a little bit thinner just so that I have really dry biltong. So now that all the meat is cut up, it's time to do the next part, which is basically marinating the meat in the spices that we created earlier with the coriander, salt, pepper, and sugar. So there's one other part to the marinating process, one other ingredient, and that's the vinegar. So you can use just plain vinegar if that's all you have, but through a bit of trial and error, I've come up with the ideal mix that I like to use anyway. And that is a mixture of white wine vinegar, cider vinegar, and Worcester sauce. So that's 4 parts white vinegar, 4 parts cider vinegar, and 1 part Worcester sauce. And that's what I have in that squeeze bottle there. It just makes it a lot easier to use rather than just pouring it on, because you end up using maybe a bit too much vinegar, and that's not a good thing. So you're not trying to pickle it, you just want to keep all the bad stuff off of the meat. So now that you've finished spicing and putting the vinegar in and layering them all out like this, you want to cover them up with tin foil and then stick them somewhere cool. So I'm going to put mine in the fridge, and you want to leave it there for about 12 hours, no more than 24 hours, but around about 12 hours is pretty good. For the next part of this process, we're going to need a biltong box. So you can create one of your own very easily. If you want, you can start off with a plastic bin you can just buy at the store, or you could create a wooden box like I've done. The basic concept is you're going to have a heat source down the bottom. You're going to create some holes near the bottom where the heat source is. It pulls in the cold air. It rises, causing convection currents, which creates a gentle breeze across the meat. But at the same time as this air is flowing over the meat, what it's doing is by heating up that air, you're reducing the relative humidity, which allows more moisture to go into the air and allows you to dry out the meat. So basically, heat up the air, and you're going to be able to decrease the humidity of that air. So if you think about it, relative humidity is pretty straightforward. If you look at that blue circle, that's cold air, and it can hold a certain amount of moisture. Now if you heat up that air, it's got the same amount of moisture, as you can see there, but because the air is heated up, you can add a whole bunch more moisture, which means that we can pull moisture out of the meat and help the drying process. There's no real trick to hanging biltong, just make sure that the meat doesn't touch each other and make sure it doesn't touch the sides of the container. You can use any old hooks you want. I use these plastic ones because they are reusable. I can wash them when I'm done, and I make quite a bit of biltong, so I don't want to be making new hooks every time. You can also see I do wipe off some of the excess spices that are there. They've done their job. It's fine to leave some of the spice on there. You'll see the end result will have quite a lot of the coriander still on there. I like that, but if you don't like that, that's fine. You can just scrape it all off. But I just take my hand and run it along the meat, and it takes off the majority of the excess. So that's all the biltong hung up. Now it's time to close up the box and let it do its thing for the next 3 to 5 days. I wouldn't take it out any sooner than 3 days, but 3 days and it'll be good, but it'll be quite moist still and quite soft. 5 days and it's very dry the way I like it. So the biltong should be ready by now. So we're just going to open this up and make sure that there's no mold on the meat or anything that looks a bit wrong or smells a bit funky. And you can see here this meat looks great. I'm happy with this. If you follow my instructions with the vinegar and the salt and made sure you had good meat in the beginning, then you shouldn't have any problem whatsoever. So now it's time to package it up. Because I've made quite a lot of biltong, I need to freeze it. So just put it inside your Ziploc bags and stick it in the freezer. You'll have no problems. I also add a desiccant packet, one of these little packets you get sometimes in your electronics. You can buy them online, but it keeps it nice and dry, keeps it healthy. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you again on the next video.